We have never had a century without great power conflict of some kind.
A superpower war would be a type of conflict we haven't seen since the Second World War, and it would be dramatically different.
Any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Direct conflict between the Soviet Union and the US thankfully never materialized. And China is the only country equipped to challenge the US as a superpower. It has the motivation and the means to do so, with a huge economy it can bring to bear.
Absolutely. This is a risk that should be taken very seriously.
主席好.
So what would a US-China war look like, and is conflict inevitable? Centuries ago, China built this Great Wall to defend its borders. And in recent decades, they've made other moves to protect and expand their territory and influence, leading to an explosive rise in power. Since 1978, when China began to open up its economy in the wake of Chairman Mao's death, China's GDP has risen an average of roughly 10% every year. It's gone from an estimated $149.5 billion in 78 to a massive 17.7 trillion in 2021. Around 800 million people have escaped poverty in the country. That's about 10% of the world's population.
That incredible economic growth essentially tethered China to global supply chains spanning the world. And that created heavy trade dependencies, and with that, vulnerabilities.
This economic rise has stalled slightly in recent years, but China remains on course to become the biggest economy in the world sometime in the next decade. The leadership in Beijing has also been on a mission to use that economic growth to transform its military power.
China thinks that now it's time for China to make use of its greater power to actually defend its long-claimed territories.
It's widely thought that China is the world's second biggest spender on its military, behind the United States. But a lack of transparency over that spending makes it difficult to prove. The country is thought to be upping its nuclear weapons stockpile, developing highly dangerous hypersonic missiles, and is already a world leader in cyber warfare. Historically, China has been a land power. But over the last decades, it's created a modern navy from scratch, most of it based in Hainan. It now has more vessels than any other country. And those warships have been built to protect their interests and project power beyond these waters. But they are untested. And President Xi Jinping has made no secret of his military ambitions. He wants China to have a world-class military, and one that can be fighting and winning wars by 2049.
China has an increasingly concentrated power system domestically, where the power is mostly concentrated under one person, China's paramount leader. So this sense of urgency comes directly from the top leadership. And now under China's environment, there is no one who is able to stand in his way. That makes it much harder to predict China's decision.
The US has the biggest military, the biggest economy, and is arguably the most influential nation in the world. But China is catching up, challenging US supremacy. And some in America do not like it.
Putting constant pressure on China.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing.
Competition with China is going to be stiff.
There have been frictions between the countries for decades, of course, with international incidents breaking out over the 95 to 96 Third Taiwan Strait crisis, the 1999 bombing of the Chinese embassy by the US in Belgrade, and the 2001 Hainan spy plane incident. But China's rise means it's now on a more even footing with the US. And with both countries vying to lead the world, incidents between them could be more likely to escalate into a major war.
Neither side, US or China, is explicitly seeking conflict, especially when we're talking about the two biggest economies in the world throwing down essentially and causing massive collateral damage in the world. But the political, economic, security, technological, societal, historical forces, all of these are converging to reach this point of intense competition.
So, how could one break out? This is the most likely place for any conflict to break out, Taiwan. The small island off the southeast coast of China split from the mainland after the Communist Revolution in 1949. Taiwan is self-run and democratic, but it's also of key strategic importance to the US and to China.
The ruling party seems to believe that Taiwan is also related to its domestic legitimacy, so it's hugely important to the ruling party. The stake is also very high for the United States. If Taiwan is lost, there is a concern that China might use Taiwan to launch further into West Pacific. And the U.S. credibility could be undermined if the U.S. doesn't come to Taiwan's defense.
Recently, President Joe Biden has reinforced America's commitment to the island.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes,
You are.
that's the commitment we made.
But Beijing has long wanted to control Taiwan, with Xi going so far as to say that reunification must be fulfilled, and he hasn't ruled out military force to achieve this.
Please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, the President and the Speaker have arrived.
In August 2022, a trip by US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan sparked one of the biggest escalations in tension for years.
And now more than ever, America's solidarity with Taiwan is crucial, and that is the message we are bringing here today.
China significantly upped military drills around the island, leading to fears it could develop into full-scale war.
美国无端挑衅在先，中方正当维权在后。佩洛西在美国政府的纵容和安排下，明目张胆窜访中国台湾地区，这一倒行逆施，严重侵犯中国主权，严重干涉中国内政，严重危害台海和平稳定。中方理所当然要做出坚决回应，我们的立场正当、合理、合法。 我们的举措坚定、有力、适度。
The war games eventually wound down, but it was a clear example of how fragile the situation over Taiwan is. China is more or less secure in its land borders. It has weaker neighbours and a vast army. At sea, it's different. It's surrounded by a string of democracies with powerful militaries like Japan, South Korea and Australia. And further out, beyond that, in the South China Sea, there are a host of countries with their own claims, their own interests to defend. The South China Sea is vital to China. The country is a net importer of energy and food, so control over the waterways could be a matter of survival. It needs to keep those routes open. It isn't just about warships, though. China has pioneered a blurring of operations with the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Maritime Militia, a fleet of fishing boats, some of them armed. Add all of them up together and you get a lot more capability, especially when it comes to transporting a large number of troops for an invasion. Hainan is where many Chinese missions would begin, but their aim would be far beyond these immediate waters. The Spratly Islands, a small militarized reef that China says is an inviolable part of its territory, are 1,500 kilometers from here and likely to be a flashpoint.
China has this long-standing position that it has territorial sovereignty over those islands. So it is hard for China to make a compromise. And China has already taken measures to strengthen and enhance those military installations on the islands. China is a huge country with plenty of interest to defend, so there are a lot of potential areas for conflict.
Like here, in the East China Sea, where there are contested areas with their old rival Japan, another key US ally. Or here, another flare-up on the China-India border, and how developing technologies could make a conflict over the Himalayan border possible. China's rivals know there could be a war on the horizon, and they're teaming up. There is the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, known as the Quad, an alliance between the US, Japan, India and Australia that was resurrected in 2017. Then the AUKUS Pact, signed at the end of 2021 between the US, UK and Australia to address the issues in the South China Sea.
It's three very like-minded allies, standing shoulder to shoulder.
China was particularly annoyed by this one, calling it irresponsible and showing an obsolete Cold War mentality.
They are making some progress. They are building stronger defense ties. They are working together to develop high-tech military technologies. There is a long way to go before the alliances like AUKUS to develop the necessary military hardware and soft skills to actually fight China in the future war.
So if the worst did happen and one of those flashpoints escalated into all-out war between China and the US, how all-encompassing would that be?
I think it's going to start small, but a small war under current circumstances could escalate very quickly. If we're talking about an all-out war, it can escalate all the way to an all-out nuclear exchange between the two major powers. Everything will be destroyed in that scenario. Both sides will resort to economic sanctions and political coercion. They will rally their own allied countries and friendly countries to support them at the UN and other international platforms. The world will be divided for sure. It's hard to imagine the boundary of that type of conflict.
The idea of the Thucydides trap states that when a rising power threatens to overtake a ruling power, war always follows. Thucydides was an ancient Greek historian, was writing about the rise of Athens and the fear that instilled in Sparta. If he was around today, he may well substitute Athens for China and Sparta for the United States.
The US, remember, hasn't really had to worry about a challenger to US primacy in global sea power tech space in a very long time. And the US is profoundly uncomfortable with that reality.
From China's perspective, the reason there is growing trouble between China and the United States is because China is rising, and China's rise is gradually challenging the predominance of Western countries in the international system.
Throughout history, rival powers have often come into conflict, but none of those had the weapons of mass destruction we have now. But the Russian invasion of Ukraine has shown that the type of wars we thought were left in the past are still possible.
It's surprising to see a military actually invade another country, violate its sovereignty in such a brutal manner, risk such economic collateral damage. But geopolitical insecurities can lead you to do some very extreme things. And so I think that's very important then to apply that lens to how we examine China.
But when it comes to war between nuclear states, nothing is inevitable.
We need to discard Cold War mentality and seek peaceful coexistence and win-win outcomes.
What we can be sure of is that the rivalry between China and the US will be the defining one of our time, whether it remains a Cold War or turns hot. It would be a conflict the likes of which the world has never seen and hopefully will not. But both sides are borrowing from an ancient Roman phrase: if you want peace, prepare for war.